Hello there, welcome to a guide and overview of Markus Wulfhart of the Empire. As always, I played through the initial turns to get a feel for the faction. These are my conclusions, and in the end I'll share the armies that I would try for the faction. Disclaimer time, it is not an in-depth guide or step-by-step, just what I typically view before starting a campaign. Without further ado, let's start with Markus Wulfhart of the Empire. So for the short victory, we need to have at least 100 acclaim at the start of your turn. That's basically this. So you need to become a champions of the Empire, really. And you need to destroy the following Lizardman factions: Hexotl, Itza, and then Clan Pestilence, Skaven, the Awakened, and the Dread Fleet. So pretty long campaign, I would say. You need to go plenty of places, you know, to the north, in plenty of directions, to the north, to the south, and even to the west here. So basically it will take some time. Then of course you need to occupy Late Razor Sack, 30 different settlements. The reward is nice. Plus 3 hero capacity is always great, so you don't need to build many buildings in order to recruit a few, and of course to have some more variety in your armies. Now, the long victory campaign, you need to achieve the short victory conditions to occupy, loot, razor, sack 70 different settlements, and basically to control all of Lustria. All these provinces here, they're basically all of Lustria. Achieving this, you'll get a plus 10 hero recruit rank, decent, so that you can continue to have great heroes for your armies in the late game. Now this one is actually better because it ties in with your short victory campaign. It's not unlikely that you will complete the short victory campaign and then nearly thereafter the long campaign, because seriously you need to defeat some of the factions that are over here. So for the most likely you'll be able to be really close to winning the long campaign after achieving the short victory. Now, Markus is the Hunts Marshal of the Empire, so he has some issues, some debuffs and some buffs. The debuff is that he has a limited roster. Only basic units are immediately recruitable. We'll see that in the buildings later on. Now you'll get reinforcements from the Empire that will bring powerful units to bolster your armies. Basically anything that is elite or considered tier 3, that's what you're going to receive. Hostile actions will also result in retaliation from local factions. So basically the enemy will have some buffs, and they will be more keen to attack you as well. You get plus 3 to the recruit rank of Huntsman Generals, faction-wide, so of course you can use those to have a little bit more of a different playstyle, I would say. And you incur a diplomatic penalty with Lizardman of -40. Now, in all essence, this is quite a difficult campaign. So the idea is simply to have, for you to play someone that is trying to go, it's Jurassic Park, it's trying to go through all the Lizardmen, and without all the necessary tools and resources. So yeah, in general it describes what the playstyle will be. Continue to attack the Lizardmen, and you get reinforcements, and the enemy becomes a bit stronger to deal with, etc. Now, climate is overall average. The only advantage is that for the most part you'll be fighting in Lustria, which is fine, let's say. But anywhere else other than going to Ulthuan perhaps, and you have some issues. You can see that it's mostly yellow terrain or red, so it's not the easiest faction to actually dominate the whole map with, for sure. As always, you can see here the types of climates, of course, that you're gonna have to face, and the penalties. Mostly the big issue is how income is going to be lower, construction time, so you have to infer more costs for a province that is never going to actually give you as much as you invest, unless you go into 200 or 300 turns of a campaign, which most likely will go if you go into domination, of course, depending on difficulty, of course. And then casualty replenishment, that's the one that creates quite some issues, of course, and the attrition, etc. That's the difficulty part of dealing with climate. Your starting location is a 3-settlement province, but you start on a minor settlement already with a port. It takes some time to reach a solid base, though. So you do have the sea to collect some goodies, and that may yet be a good alternative if you run out of income. typical expansions to gain a foothold here in Lustria, of course, after your first province. Maybe cut off the north from the south. That's typically what you should do. And then you can either expand into the north or expand into the south, up to you, depending on the enemies. If you will need to always go to the Galleon's graveyard in the middle here at one point eventually, but nothing wrong with leaving that for last, given how difficult it is actually to take. Your unique campaign conditions will prove the biggest challenge, though the location does not help either. You're in the middle of some enemies, very closely these greenskins will probably attack, and you have unlikely allies, or some, allies that you may have, but you never know how good they're going to be. I'm talking about these other Empire factions and this other Bretonnian faction. So we'll see. It depends, true, in terms of how the campaign goes, but by all means, it's always keep in mind that you'll probably most likely always be surrounded and always at war. In terms of diplomacy, you are still part of the Order Tide. On this side, other Empire factions, Bretonnia being Alberic here, and of course the other Empire faction, and High Elves will most likely be your closest allies. There are some dwarfs nearby, so who knows, they survive long enough. Now, Lizardmen, Skaven, Monogods, Vampire Coast, all will be your enemies. Outposts should provide you with much needed troops as well. This is probably the faction that will benefit the most from that mechanic, because you lack elite units, so you may as well get them from other factions. So seek out any frontline cavalry, artillery as you can. You will have at least missile troops to survive. So the choices that I would go for is, of course, with the Bretonnians, any cavalry that they can have. Flying cav would be a really good one, and from the High Elves, anything that they have in their roster really would assist at their infantry, their missiles, their cavalry, or their flying entities, single entities. Those would always be great. So you have options. Just as soon as you get an outpost, try to aim for a combination using those units, of course. So the mechanics for Wulfhart are heavily modified from the typical Empire campaign, which I like. Acclaim is measured in how well you're doing in your conquests, how many settlements you've captured, how many hunters you have unlocked, more on that in a bit, and how many ports you've built or upgraded. So owning ports is really good for this faction as well. Now, this implies that you'll be, going through here, and this always allows you to receive better units from the Empire, but of course you can see that the diplomatic relations will completely be sour with Lizardmen. At one point, there's no chance that you will ever have any Lizardmen friends. It also unlocks the specific buildings that you need to build everything, so by the time that you reach 100, you have unlocked everything. You have no need for those supplies anymore, but of course it's fine. So this is a bar that should always be, leveling up until the point that you've reached Champions of the Empire and you've finished, actually, probably most likely the short campaign at that point. Now, you also have hostility. This is because you've been aggressive, and it's how it reflects how the enemy will see you. The more hostility, the faster you'll receive reinforcements, but the enemy will start having some massive buffs against you. They may also spawn armies to fight you. For instance, this army here, this faction here, is just a spawned army to come and fight me because the hostility level is so large, of course. Okay, now then we have Imperial supplies. Let me show you here. So Imperial supplies are like this, when they show up, and then you'll be able to choose specific ones depending on what you aim to. Maybe you want those infantry units, maybe you want some cavalry, maybe you want some artillery units, maybe you want some more war wagons. It's up to you. So these will all differ depending on some specifics, but of course these are always immediately able to be recruited, which is excellent. It means you don't have to waste any time recruiting those. Imagine that they just arrived at the shore, some units for you to use, which is excellent. I like that mechanic a lot, actually. Now, in terms of the last one, there will be Wulfhart's Hunters. So basically, the more to unlock these, you need to accomplish specific ones. For instance, I need to move a character here in order to unlock this this hunter, and I need to move a character here to Schlang back to unlock another hunter, and then they'll have their specific missions, as you can see there. So in all of them, they will have a character objective. Of course, you'll need to go around. The good thing is that these are all different ones. You know, for instance, this is a witch hunter. This one is an engineer. So this one is a wayfarer. Now this one is a paladin. So all of them are pretty different, okay, and it will reinforce your faction really well, such as you can see here with this Wulfhart's hunter, Kalara, and of course they all have specific skills that can assist your army, so you'll have some different combinations that you can use in terms of armies because of having one or two or even all of those heroes in one, you know? So in terms of province edicts, you have the basic for the Empire: control, enemy hero action success, chance of intercepting an army, and less corruption. You also have income from all buildings, and some recruitment cost, or local recruitment capacity. You also have, of course, growth and income from trade tariffs. Now, one note here, don't neglect this one. The enemy hero action success, chance of intercepting an army, you know, especially if you're going to fight Skaven and the greenskins here, as it's happening to me right now. I cannot tell you how many times I've intercepted them, and I don't know if it was because of this or not, but the point of the matter is that it was ineffective. You know, I made sure that I tried to intercept those. I put some army to intercept those if they would move against me. So try it out. It's not for one turn that you're going to miss out on, you know, some +4 control, you know. So yeah, that's something that sometimes may be overlooked a little bit. Now, in terms of army stances, let me just recruit one very easily at anything, just so that I can show you. There we go. So we have the basic ones. Really, channeling costs 10% movement, of course gives you Winds of Magic Power Reserve. Then we have Encamp that costs 50% movement. And then we have immune to attrition, and of course enables replenishment. Most of the time you do this, especially in areas where you're not native to the terrain. Then we have raiding, of course. It gives you immunity to most attrition. It costs 50% movement. Ambush 35% movement. You already know what it does. And forced march, of course. So always make sure, I only mentioned those specific ones, of course, but always ensure that you know everything. Like for instance, march, you're more vulnerable for ambush, so make sure you're not marching in any Skaven territory. Trust me, you'll be ambushed. If you're going to be attacked very soon, retreat is impossible, so you're gonna have to fight it and you may lose the battle. So be wary of those negatives, of course. Forced march is more when you're going really fine on your own territory, trust me. Of course, there are some other effects that you may use the forced march for, but just be mindful of all the negatives that may happen. One particular aspect of the buildings in terms of Wulfhart's faction is that they are blocked initially. You cannot build these ones until the required acclaim level has been completed. Of course, this for the most part will feel about the same time, so by the time that you would be able to build barracks, you probably already will have that acclaim, but you have to be wary, especially for the 5th level of things, or for this. It may take some more time than you would, you know, honestly need to benefit from those. So always have that in mind. It's really rather difficult. Of course, you can have, you know, some basic cavalry, some basic front line and missile troops. Especially the good thing that we do have the handgunners, the war wagons and mortars to use. At least that gives some flexibility to the faction, but it's not an easy faction to play with in the beginning. It's a different campaign. That's what I feel. So in terms of buildings, once more, you already seen that you're up to some limitations in the beginning, and the more acclaim that you get, for instance, I already got some here, you're able to unlock some buildings. So you have no specific buildings in any province other than, you know, just these resources ones, of course. No landmarks for any of your faction, basically, but you do have military buildings that you need 6 for full military. I'm counting also the armory because it allows some recruitment of other units. Tier 3 units are somewhat decent. You do have your great swords, you do have your huntsmen, you do have some outriders, grenade launchers. These are really cool. You have some knights of the blazing sun, you have some flagellants. Of course, these are important only because they are unbreakable, so they'll hold the line until they die. And then you have some mortars, some handgunners, so you have some tools to fight, but alas, you don't have a lot of tools versus lizardmen, which is the biggest issue. You know, against their single entities, you're lacking some of the most powerful units, such as the great cannons or the demigryphs knights with halberds, you know, because those are the single entity, let's say, killers that you may have. So try to upgrade those, try to obtain those via those imperial supplies, you know. So yeah. Now, in terms of infrastructure, we have a growth and casualty replenishment rate, we have an income building, we also have a control and hero recruitment building, which is for the witch hunter, and then we have basically a campaign movement, growth, and income from all buildings. Now, let's talk a little bit about research. So, research is quite nice. It focuses on every part of the game, okay, and then specifically for, you know, less upkeep, less recruitment costs, you know, here some more income from trade, then you have some more income from industry, etc., some more less recruitment duration, more hero action stance, okay, so less construction costs. So basically it's all very divided. In terms of the diplomatic mission, this may appear to be costly, but this is great to immediately get an outpost, because for 50 diplomatic relations, as long as you're enemies with some of their enemies as well, you'll most likely get the benefits to get an alliance, then you'll build an outpost, then you'll get access to their units, which is great because you lack units. So for instance, getting one with High Elves or getting one with Bretonia, by all means that should be a good idea. Or you can go the other way around. You're going to fight a lot of lizardmen, might as well get some melee defense and leadership here. If you're going up against the vampiric host, might as well get the melee attack and leadership buffs. So yeah, always consider those. Particularly for Wulfhart, he has the Hunter's Guild, which gives more rank for all Imperial supplies units, and then you have casualty replenishment rate and more control. I always like casualty replenishment rate. I just feel like because you have to gain this one and then to obtain this one, it's not as useful early game. You have other ways to get replenishment. But this one I liked. Construction costs minus for ports and time for ports is really cool. And then you have receive an additional detachment or reinforcements with every Imperial supplies delivery. I liked this a lot. I went immediately for it on this playthrough and it paid off. But of course, other priorities that you wish, you may choose. Just remember how well research will tie into your playstyle as well. Okay. So as always, you have your Lord specific ones, or then we have the yellow line or melee line. Basically, he does have two for that, which makes him a very powerful fighter and at the same time as a good ranged character. The only thing that he lacks is actually a mount, so he'll always be a small target, by the way. Now, you do have a very expensive red line system. The main issue is that any alternative or early mid-game units will cost skill points in comparison to elite units. So I'm already preparing for elite units here instead of investing here, but you know, it's not like you don't have 3 skill points to waste for those. It's up to you. It's your decision. You'll see it better when I see the red line, show the red line skills and all the units that it gives. Now, you also have, in terms of the blue line, basically you have the lesser upkeep and more replenishment rate. I always like to use those. You can also, of course, go to Lightning Strike, a very, very often used tactical approach. It's up to you, but for the most part, the biggest problem is that I don't see anything really important here in the initial phase of the blue line, so I always just get, you know, more campaign movement range. That always helps, and then go into the red line or into the yellow line if possible. In this case, for instance, I just wanted my initial units to be powerful. That's up to it. And then I would probably go in, if I would replace these two, I would probably get, you know, some harder hit or the focused shot and try and going into his line here. In terms of heroes, for instance, let me talk about those. So You do have replenishment with your warrior priest, and he also gives buffs to the nearby units, so he's an excellent way of supporting your whole army. And you kind of need it specifically with Markus, because your units will always be a little bit weaker unless you can rush, you know, and finish the acclaim bar really fast. But yeah, for the most part I would recommend getting a few warrior priests. The only part is, for instance, both the Empire Captain and the Witch Hunter, they may be proving very good to snipe those single entities from the Lizardmen. So yeah, there's some decision making to be done here. And of course you'll have your wizards, as always. The good thing about the Empire is they have so many schools of so many magic schools that you can choose a lot of different ones for your playthroughs, of course. So here we have the red line skills for the Empire. As stated before, note how we have the division between, you know, lower tier infantry and the elite infantry being the greatswords there. So this may prove unwise. For instance, if the greatswords would here, you'll most likely always get some infantry, so it will be a no-brainer. But because they're here, sometimes you'll just want to upgrade to great swords to have them in the front lines. Maybe sometimes you'll have the halberdiers. It's up to you. So just be mindful that it is costly. That's the only issue here. You also have most missile units here. A good thing is that they also incorporate the cavalry missile units, so you can have some different choices in terms of more mobility or more staying power, basically. And then you have all artillery here, which is excellent. You'll upgrade from mortars to later on Hellstorm rocket batteries. Maybe you'll want some cannons for single targets, for anti-large, basically, or you can just go for the Hellblaster volley gun, which is a very good mix of those. Now, Wulfhart, he focuses on huntsmen, so here are 3 armies just based around them. Notice how rather expensive they are in terms of redline skills. Okay, now basically, of course, he does focus on archers, but archers are really a very early game unit. You wouldn't use them even buffed into the late game. So yeah, he does give the huntsmen a really nice improvement with the double shot. So they'll have extra projectiles, they'll do a crazy amount of damage on the Wulfhart. So yeah, that's why. Okay, now the first one is whether one army that I would do more thematically, perhaps, especially for the early game. You know, try to get to these points. Of course, before you, when you're getting to this point, you're most likely already having some great swords and some demigryphs from the Imperial supplies, but nothing wrong with using this for an early stage, and then you can of course upgrade to this one if you prefer. This is more of a standard army, really. The only thing that I changed is huntsmen instead of handgunners, really. I've added one another one, but you're fine using just 4 or 5. At least that's already a good percentage. 3 would be too less to benefit from all this, so that's the one thing. And this is more of an ambush style army, you know, with the huntsmen over there. You know, you'll just charge in with the cavalry. The wagons will deal with anything else as well. These grenadiers are good for any blobs that will happen. Of course, the huntsman's there, and you have to consider taking, you know, a couple of heroes maybe to botch the enemies. So it's an idea. Maybe you'd like to use that. In terms of other armies, of course, with the other you know, huntsman generals there, so you can have some bonuses for greatsword units, spearmen and halberds, or for huntsmen and archers. So of course, some basic compositions around those. There's no need for so much infantry if you prefer. I just like to use lots of infantry in my playthroughs, but it's really up to you guys. It's a matter of style. Okay, so as always, you know, I'm putting here a warrior priest and a flame caster. It's up to you which hero you choose, if any, or if you want to have 4 or 5 heroes. The only thing that I intend to is that I typically only have a caster hero and a support or melee hero, someone that can face off with the Lord, you know, some enemy Lord or some enemy hero that is melee hero, that sort of idea. Okay. Finally, a couple of combinations. These are just some for fun. This is a more straightforward combination, as well as this one, you know, just for the good thing is how effective they are in terms of redline skills as well. So yeah, these are the ones that I will be using, or trying to aim for. Of course, different combinations, more great swords or less great swords, more cavalry, less cavalry. It's up to you guys, of course. And these two are just trying to make something happen and trying to use nearly every unit. Remember that these units, they can get buffed pretty decently, and they are unrottable, so they'll stay to the end. The good thing about that is that, of course, it will give you a lot of time to hammer and anvil. It will give you a lot of time to, position your artillery in a way that they can hit their targets, that sort of idea. Okay, and of course, siege tanks, you also have to remember they are really the terror routing unit that you can have in your army, so sometimes this is good, especially for those Skaven, for instance. Okay, and then of course this is all ideas. I remember that in my Empire playthroughs I did use this one, for instance. Luminarchs there just to try to hit any single entities. They do miss sometimes, but it's still fun to see and to try that. Nothing wrong with you putting demigryphs here instead of those Reichsguard. This was just me trying to attempt some sweeper armies, basically. A significantly different and harder campaign. The mechanics do make you feel that you're all alone trying to fight overwhelming odds with little assistance. The more aggressive you are, the better the assistance, but the harder the enemy. The initial stages of the campaign will force you to expand into different positions, and the enemy may close in from all sides. So pay attention to diplomacy and see if you can have some friends to help you out. A campaign that focuses on different units for the Empire may yet prove to be quite fun, and especially with a missile-heavy, war wagon-heavy playstyle. Now, your army consists still of average infantry, great missiles and artillery, great cavalry, no single entities. Do note, siege tank and luminarch are more artillery than true single entities, by the way. And then it lacks flying units. Now, replenishment is good so long as you're in Lustria. Otherwise, it may prove really difficult later on. Now, I believe it's time. Welcome to Jurassic Park, Dr. Wulfhart.